Kia ora, welcome to Vitz Auckland 2020. This year's event is an online series of talks featuring women sharing their stories about their work and career contributions in many industries and academia. Vitz Auckland is an independent event organised by the University of Auckland Faculty of Engineering to coincide with the annual Global Women in Data Science Conference. I'm Kate Kolich, Vitz Ambassador, and I'm delighted to be helping to share these inspiring talks. Today's speaker is Emma Vitz. Emma is an Actuarial Analyst at Finity Consulting. Finity Consulting is a silver sponsor for Women in Data Science Auckland 2020. Emma has been involved with the Vitz program since 2017, where she facilitated a panel in both the Auckland and Wellington events. Emma works as an actuary and data scientist and has particular interest in geospatial analysis, climate change, and natural disasters. In this talk, Emma will share how embarking on a 30-day map challenge enabled her to learn new skills and visualize different types of data.
My name's Emma, and I will be talking to you about what I've called the data science side hustle, which is all about how you can use personal data science projects as a way of stepping into the kind of work that you really love doing. All right, so let's have a quick overview of my journey so far. So I actually started out studying psychology, which is slightly unexpected when people sometimes hear that, but that was sort of where I started out with the potential intention of becoming a psychologist, which obviously didn't happen. And then I had to do some statistics papers as part of that. And unlike a lot of the people in my class, I really liked them. So I actually really enjoyed those papers, and I kept adding more and more papers in statistics to my psychology degree. And at the end, I ended up having a double major because I'd gotten so into statistics. And by the end of my degree, I knew that I kind of wanted to head down the data science or statistics focused path more so than psychology. And so I started looking for some internships that kind of related to that as a way of getting more experience in the real world and working with real data and, you know, all of the challenges and the learning curves that come with that. So I actually ended up interning at TradeMe, doing some work for their advertising team, which was really cool. And I also did an internship at the University of Auckland with their physics department, which again is a slightly unexpected combination, but that was really cool as well. So then I finished those internships and I was looking for a graduate job, you know, a job coming out of university. And I actually applied for the job that I now have, which is as an actuarial analyst. Now, of course, whenever I say that, everyone says, a what? No one knows what an actuary is, but that is what I applied for, and that's the job I now do. And we'll have a bit of a chat about what that means in more detail. But basically, what I do is I do risk analysis for insurance companies. So it's a very mathematical and statistical job. We actually sit exams. And so there's a lot of kind of crossover between what I did at uni and what I'm doing now, which is really cool. And so within that, one of the areas that I've been focusing on is natural perils and climate change. So this is an area that actually has quite a big impact on insurers. They obviously are on the hook for a lot of those, you know, the result of any kind of natural disaster, and they're sort of affected by climate change in that way. So that's my journey so far, and obviously that's to be continued, and I'm hoping there's lots more exciting learning ahead. So let's just have a quick overview of what an actuary is. So some people might see us as professional pessimists. Now, of course, being a pessimist, we always say that we're realists, but that's not necessarily how everyone else sees us. So like I said before, we do risk analysis for insurance companies. And often this kind of splits out into three big areas. So you've got your pricing, which is helping insurers determine how much they should charge for their products, which is in part influenced by an assessment of risk. So obviously if you're a very risky person in whatever respect, then the insurer will probably charge you more than if they don't see you as being very risky. So we help them kind of assess that risk. There's also reserving, which is all about kind of making sure that the insurer has enough money for future claims. And then there's the capital side of things, which is about the investments that the insurer has and how those are managed. So those are the three big areas that actuaries work in. Now, why do I think that having a data science side hustle has helped me get to the place where I am today? Well, I think these are kind of the four big areas or the influences that I think it's had for me. So the first thing that I find really useful about doing data science outside of your strictly speaking 9-to-5 job is that it helps you learn new skills. So as a university student or a recent graduate, this is obviously really important. And the way that I did that was I took some R and Python courses while I was still at university. And it just puts you in contact with real data, which is very important and is usually something that isn't part of your university curriculum. So you might know a lot about statistics, but if you don't know how to clean a data set or if you don't know how to manipulate it so that you can do something with it, you're not actually going to get to apply that knowledge at all. So I really recommend that you push yourself to learn those new skills. Having some data science projects as sort of a side hustle also allows you to find what interests you. So it sort of gives you the opportunity to experiment with the kind of project, the kind of data source, and the types of languages that you might be able to use. So the way that I did that was I obviously had those internships, and I also, as I was going through those Python and R courses, I would try and apply what I'd learned to a real world piece of data. And it just allows you to find out what you're interested in, what you might want to do more of, and yeah, get to know kind of what's a possible job that might interest you. Now, the third thing that's really important is that you share your work, which is something that a lot of people are very uncomfortable with. So as a way of connecting with other people and sharing the kinds of stuff that you've done, you really need to put yourself out there and kind of be willing to share your work. A lot of people are very nervous about this because they don't feel like it's good enough, or they're nervous about what people will say. And I really think that this is something, if you are able to kind of push through that and do it anyway, you'll really see some benefit. So the way that I did this, one of the big ways was through Twitter. So I started using Twitter sort of around the same time as I was doing those courses, and I would basically post stuff that I'd done, and I still do that to this day. And then there's obviously meetups and conferences and other kinds of meetings with others in person where you can share your work. So all of this kind of allows you to be in a position where you're able to shape your career, which basically means you have some idea of what you enjoy. You can put your hand up and say, this is the kind of project I really like. I have some skills in that area. Can I be part of that? And a lot of the time, people really appreciate that. It's always great to work with someone who's enthusiastic. And if you can back that up with some skills, even if they are a work in progress, as they'll pretty much always be, people will be really enthusiastic, they'll respond really well and they will want to take you on a lot of the time. So the way that I did this was in terms of the climate and natural perils work that I do at Finity. So I was that annoying person who was like, I love this kind of stuff. Give me all the work you've got. I want to do more of it. And it does make a difference. It does mean that people think of you when they have that kind of work available. And it means I get to do the kind of work that I really enjoy. So now that we've sort of talked about why you might want to have a data science side hustle, let's think about what that could look like. So one of the projects that I did recently was the 30-day map challenge, which was basically a challenge that was run through Twitter, where every day you would make a map and there would be a theme. And yeah, based on that theme, you would make a map, you would publish it, and you could see what other people did as well. So here you can see the initial tweet that sort of kicked this off, and you can also see the themes that that were used each day. And you can also see that people sort of started off pretty strong on day one, and as we got closer to day 30, we did have some dropouts, which is fine because it was a big ask. So I wanted to share some of the maps I did because I love maps, and you know, who doesn't? And also just to show you some of the lessons that came out of this. So this one was really popular. This was a map that a lot of people really engaged with when I put it out on Twitter. And it was basically looking at cats in Wellington and looking at how far they traveled. So I had a data set of cats, and I looked at the one that traveled the furthest, which was Blue Nelson, who he had an average of 3.9 kilometers of walking every day. And then the cat that traveled the least, which was Tasha, she only traveled 42 meters a day and was, by the looks of it, stuck in a house. And I think the reason that people really connected with this was because there was a real story. You know, a lot of us have pets, or we wish we could have a pet, and we can really kind of, you know, imagine this couch potato cat, or this cat that's just absolutely roaming the neighborhood far and wide. So I think when you're doing some kind of data science project, it's important to think about how other people are going to be able to connect with what you're doing. So this was one that I really liked personally. It's also an image that was relatively popular. So this was some work I did on satellite data, looking at the Waikato River and trying to identify what was a river and what was not. I mean, it's just a nice picture, to be honest with you. And yeah, I was really proud of this and still really enjoy it, you know, looking at it. So I thought I would chuck that one in there. Another example of sort of a story that people connected with was this one here, where the theme was urban or rural. And basically what I did was I looked at the definitions that Stats NZ has. So they have things like urban, rural, kind of like a small rural centre, secondary urban area, so on, which is on the right. And I was sort of thinking, like, what does it mean for me? What sort of distinguishes an urban and a rural area for me? And I live in Auckland, and I was like, how far away is it from the nearest H&M? So I went and found the coordinates for the H&Ms in New Zealand, calculated the distance from each house in New Zealand to the closest H&M, and I mapped that and compared it to the more official categorizations that Stats NZ puts out. And again, people found this quite funny, and they sort of related to it because they could sort of imagine themselves in that situation, or, you know, it was kind of a nice story to think about. So that was one I really enjoyed. Now, of course, there were also some that I didn't love quite as much. When you're putting out a map every single day, not all of them are going to be as good as you would like. And I think there's a real lesson in here that we need to hit publish before we're ready, because otherwise we really don't ever put our work out there. So on the left, I've got the proportion of people who commute by car in central Auckland, and it's at a mesh block level. And the theme was hexagon. So I was basically trying to have each mesh block be a hexagon. And it's an ugly map. There's a lot going on. It's quite messy. It just didn't work out very well, even though the data is actually quite interesting. And then on the right, I've got the maximum temperature of various parts of Australia going back quite far. So this is actually an animation, although it's not showing up as an animation in this presentation. And I was still really happy with this one because it was the first time I'd animated something like this. But it's not, you know, visually, it's not my best work. So I think sometimes we need to sort of accept that we might not like the way something looks or it didn't turn out that well, but there's still a lot of learning that goes into it, and you can still publish that, and people will really respect that you've put the work in and that you're able to say, like, I learned a lot, even though, you know, there's always things that we could improve on. So what were the outcomes of this challenge? The first one was that I was able to connect with other people who are doing this around the world, which is really cool to be able to see others' work and also kind of expand your network of people that you can ask questions of or, you know, connect with. The second one was that I got to learn new skills. And I think putting yourself in that position of having to learn something is really important because it can otherwise kind of fall by the wayside with everything else that we've got on. And then the last two outcomes are a little bit more, I guess, practical or, you know, things that happen. So the first one was that I was asked to teach others a bit of geospatial stuff at work, which was cool because it sort of, first of all, allows me to share that, but also it sort of puts me in a position where I get to do more of the work that I really enjoy. And I also ended up giving 3 presentations on this, including this one here. So to finish off, I wanted to mention a couple of projects that I am part of at work that I really enjoy and that kind of that used similar skills to what the 30-day map challenge used. So these are some examples of the kinds of things that I get to do because I sort of, you know, develop this set of skills and put myself out there and, you know, found something I wanted to do. So the first one, which is the one on the top, is I was asked to find all of the cul-de-sacs in Australia, which is kind of an odd request, but it was actually really fun. And this is Alice Springs that you can see there with the red dots being the cul-de-sacs. So that was a really cool project in terms of working with really big data, automating something across, you know, a relatively large country. And just thinking about things in a completely different way to any other project that I'd worked on before at that point. So the lower picture is the Australian Actuaries Climate Index, which is something that we put out 4 times a year that quantifies the change in extreme weather in Australia for the insurance industry. So it's a little bit different from most climate work in that because we're in insurance, we focus on those extremes a lot more. We're not so much interested in the change in the average, you know, weather. We want to know, you know, are extreme events happening more often, because that's what affects insurers. So again, that's something that I find really interesting and get to be a part of every season. And finally, this is part of a nationwide natural perils model that we are building in New Zealand. So that's looking at assessing the risk of flood and storm at a house level. So for an individual dwelling for every house in New Zealand. And this is more or less my baby. So it's something I'm really interested in. It involves a lot of cool coding work. And it's really exciting to be part of it. So I'm really glad that I get to do that. All right, so that's my presentation today. I hope this has inspired you to maybe pick up a side project that involves data science and put your work out there. If you do want to get in touch with me, you can find me on Twitter. That's probably where I'm most active. So that's at Emma Vitz, and then LinkedIn is just my name as well. So thank you to Kate and Rosalind for organising this conference, and to all of you for coming along, and I hope it's been helpful.